Kaulana na pua o Hawaii. Kupa ama hope o kaina. Ki mai ka elele o ka loko ino. Pala pala nunu me ka paka. Kaulana na pua o Hawaii. Kupa ama hope o kaina. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke are.
Aloha, I'm Lila Berg, host of this program. Welcome to the Sovereignty Conversations, dialogues with Hawaiian sovereignty thought leaders about models of sovereignty and Hawaii's political future. History has revealed that in 1898, the United States extended its territory in the Pacific by annexing the Republic of Hawaii through a United States congressional resolution understood in international law as an illegal act. The Republic of Hawaii became a territory of the United States in 1900 and a state in 1959. On January 21, 1993, President Clinton signed the Apology Bill, acknowledging the United States' actions to claim the Kingdom of Hawaii as its territory. Since that time, thought leaders throughout Hawaii have been wrestling with what the next step should be regarding the political and governing future of our islands. Today's conversation with our guest offers one of several models of sovereignty. And I'd like to welcome you, Leon, for joining us. Leon Siu.
Mahalo. Good to be here.
Thank you very much for your time. Can you share with us a little bit of your organization, your role, and this model of sovereignty?
Maybe I can speak a little bit more about the introduction.
Thank you.
Because what the introduction tells us is that the United States actually acquired, or thought they acquired, the Hawaiian Kingdom, when actually all they acquired was the Republic of Hawaii, which was a fraudulent government that was put in place by those that overthrew the Hawaiian Kingdom. And that fraudulent government claimed that it owned or it controlled the political and the real estate of the Hawaiian Kingdom, when actually it didn't. There was no title transferred, there was no authority transferred. But the territory of Hawaii was comprised of this Republic of Hawaii, now reconstituted through United States law as a territory. And then it became a state later. All the while, the Hawaiian Kingdom is still there, but being ignored and also being covered up. There was a 60-year campaign to actually obliterate any memory of the Hawaiian Kingdom as far as it being a continual entity. But in recent years, particularly in the last 30 years, we began to understand what occurred and the sleight of hand that took place in the late 1890s. And to the point where we understood that the Hawaiian Kingdom actually is still in existence. Particularly over the last 10 years, this has become quite prominent, or actually 13 to 14 years. This has become actually established now in international law or in international circles that the Hawaiian Kingdom is a nation in continuity. It was never relinquished, it was never extinguished. So it is a nation in continuity, although most people can't see it. But under, again, international law and under political formats, this existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom now creates a very, very difficult problem for the United States because of its claim of sovereignty over the Hawaiian Islands. Now, the existence of the continual existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom is what prompted many of us to respond and say, this is our country and we have the right to reestablish it or to awaken it, reawaken it, and to enliven it and to move forward. The only problem is that the United States is continuing to claim sovereignty over it. I describe it sometimes like it's like a 900-pound gorilla sitting on the Hawaiian Kingdom, obliterating any recognition of it or any sign of it. But that our problem now is to move the 900-pound gorilla off us to expose that we are still here.
Well, I think it even gets more complicated because within the state, there's decisions that are being made regarding land and the
Correct.
confusion of ceded lands and kingdom lands. And
Yes.
so let's hold that as the context, that there's a lot of confusion.
Yes.
And there is recognition
Right.
and acknowledgement that the kingdom still exists. Your role in your organization.
Well, let me go back to the confusion. There's confusion not of the facts, there's confusion of the interpretation of where we are today. And because of certain parties trying to feed that confusion. And one of the biggest confusion is identifying who the Hawaiian people are. Back in 1893, when the Hawaiian Kingdom was still active, the citizenry of the Hawaiian Kingdom did not consist of only Hawaiian people with Hawaiian blood, Hawaiian koko. It was a citizenship that was like any other country, comprised of people of different ethnic groups, different bloodlines, and all that. And they comprised the Hawaiian Kingdom.
And there was ways to become a citizen.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you could either be born here, which is the international way of understanding citizenship, or you could be naturalized. And there are a couple of other ways too, but those are the two principal ways. And by doing that, you actually became a citizen, a participating citizen of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So there were many former Americans, former British, former Russians, former Frenchmen who were actually citizens of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So when the United States refers to trying to make amends for the overthrow, say, for instance, in the Apology Law of 1993, they were only referring to the native Hawaiians. And that was deliberate because what they're trying to do is limit the scope of the responsibility and the scope of the, liability for the crime that was committed, when actually everyone who was a Hawaiian citizen at that time was injured by the takeover by the United States.
Well, I remember I recall seeing petitions to support the Queen
Yes.
in her petition to the United States government, signed by the nationals, by
Yes.
the citizens of Hawaii.
Correct. And there
So-
were many non-native Hawaiians
Yes.
on that list.
And we had a constitutional democracy here at that
Correct.
time.
Yes.
So that's the framework here. And your organization is assisting people to understand.
That's
And-
right. We notice that if the Hawaiian Kingdom is still in existence, then let's show people that it's still here. And so many of us decided to re-up or to reestablish our citizenship, or let's say our nationality, to our nation. And so we actually have become, once again, Hawaiian nationals, or the more accurate term is Hawaiian subjects of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
You travel internationally on an American passport, though.
I do, but I also travel on a Hawaiian Kingdom passport. In some places, well, most places won't accept the Hawaiian Kingdom passport yet, but some places do. And when I go to those countries, I use a Hawaiian Kingdom passport.
So help us understand why you go to those countries,
Okay.
and what the model is that you're proposing.
Well, like I said, there was a very concerted effort on the part of the United States to obliterate any reference to or any remembrance of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And that took place on an international level as well as locally. So what I'm doing in the international arena is to remind people that we are still here. And just to have conversations, just to go talk story with them and say, I'm from the Hawaiian Kingdom. And they go, what? And I said, the Hawaiian Kingdom, we're still here. And it really raises their interest in it, because everybody loves Hawaii. And they really love the idea of Hawaii still being an independent nation. You know, the whole idea of us being a state of the United States has not really settled yet in the rest of the world. So, there's very, very much interest in it, and there's also very much curiosity on the part of these people. So we start discussing what actually happened, and almost everyone I've talked to are intrigued by how we might be able to regain our identity and our stature as a sovereign nation.
So let's talk about regaining that identity in not only the international world, but also with regards to the relationship with the United States.
Let me continue a little bit more with the international world, because the international world, back in 1946, when the United Nations was formed, there were 56 nations of the original core, and the rest were relegated to a term called nations to be decolonized, non-self-governing territories. And since then, there are now 193 nations in the United Nations, which means there's been this huge amount, more than 2/3 of the current United Nations actually were nations that were under captivity or under occupation or under colonization by the other states. So right now, the United Nations and the general feeling of the world community is that people should have the opportunity to be independent. Most of the countries have already exercised that. So we have a lot of empathy with us as far as countries that were once colonies or occupied. And so they are actually supremely interested in helping us regain our stature, especially when they find out we never lost it. It's just been covered up, it's just been blanketed over, and the memory of our statehood, our nation, was, they tried to erase it.
It has become so complicated.
Yes.
So many pieces now because of the time that's gone by, and also the generations that maybe don't remember anymore. It's a historical fact. And yet for you and your organization, it's a living reality.
Correct. And it's actually becoming less complicated. We're beginning to eliminate different options that we feel do not apply to our situation. And so that's why I am committed toward independence for our nation, to restoring Hawaii as an independent nation, the Hawaiian Kingdom. And there are others, of course, working on different models. I find that those models are not really optimal for us, for expressing who we are in terms of self-governance.
So talk a little bit more, if you will, about this model of independence.
Yes.
Independent from the United States,
Correct.
Independent within itself. You know, there's many descriptions. What model how do you envision it happening?
Okay. Hawaii was an independent state in the 1800s. And we were recognized, we had treaties with 46 other nations. And those treaties were never abrogated, they were never canceled. They still are alive, only they have not been in use, so to speak. So we would like for the Hawaiian Kingdom to become again an independent nation, a fully self-sustaining and self-standing independent nation. We were recognized totally by the United States, and we're under recognition by the United States at the time when the United States invaded. You know, so that was the greatest breach by the United States, or the greatest violation by the United States.
Who would run the country, or how would the leadership be determined?
Right. So the interesting thing about putting the Hawaiian Kingdom into sort of a suspended animation is that when the United States relents and actually stops claiming that then the Hawaiian Kingdom actually springs forward again. And so who would run it would be, according to the Constitution and the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, as they were back in 1893. So it's actually intact. There still are laws. It's just that we've been covered up by U.S. laws.
So the structure of government
The structure of government
is still there.
And like other constitutional governments, there are constitutional ways that you can go about to update it or to change it and things like that. But it goes back to the original government, or the original format that was there, and they can be carried forward.
At the time, we had a monarchy, so it was a
Yes.
constitutional monarchy.
Correct.
How would that be determined?
Well, it still is a constitutional monarchy, only we don't have a monarch on the seat. We don't have people filling the offices. We don't have a legislature operating, although Henry Noah will contest that. He has a legislature operating. So It really doesn't matter when a country, and we found this out particularly with the decolonization of these other nations that came after the initial founding of the United Nations. There were many, many different models that were used to gain their independence or their liberation. And then the most recent and probably the most applicable, and somebody else can speak to this, would be the Baltic states after the fall of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union broke apart, it now no longer held sway over these different countries. And so many of them simply revived who they were and asserted their independence that way.
This would require the people,
Yes.
citizens residing in these islands,
Yes.
to become voting members of the kingdom,
Of the new government.
of the new government. I guess my question at the moment really has to do with the United States needed Hawaii for political and strategic and also economic reasons. I would be hard pressed to suggest that they would easily say, go
But
back
you
to
raise
history.
a very, very good question. The question becomes, who is eligible and to assert himself as a Hawaiian national? And it's those that have chosen that, first of all, have the right to be a Hawaiian national, those who were born here, particularly those who were born of and have are descendants
Ancestry.
of nationals of the Hawaiian Kingdom from 1893. So myself, I can reclaim my citizenship in the Hawaiian Kingdom because I'm a natural-born national of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So if we say the Hawaiian Kingdom never went away, then we still are here, and those born here are still part of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And then, of course, the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom allow people to be naturalized. So the question becomes, who is a U.S. citizen or a foreigner, and who is an actual national of the Hawaiian Kingdom? And it will come down to people having to choose which one they would identify with. Again, I refer to the Baltic states because they ran into that problem also. In Estonia, for instance, they had 600,000 Russian troops and dependents living there who all expected to vote, and they were going to be voting for reestablishing communism. But the Estonians raised the question and said, are you really Estonians? Can you vote in here? So it's an established international practice that only those of that place are allowed to vote for that.
So do you envision there being a vote? Put, first of all, a registration of who becomes a citizen, or what would the process be?
First of all, the process would be that the Hawaiian Kingdom would actually automatically spring forward once the U.S. steps aside.
Okay.
Okay, it would spring
Therein
forward.
lies
And then at that point, then it would establish who are the nationals and all that, and they would be the ones to reconstruct their government.
Okay. The United States stepping aside is a gigantic step. Is your organization, who is engaged in conversation with them for this possibility?
Well, the United States actually is running from engagement in this conversation, and we have tried to engage them in a number of forums, particularly in the United Nations, and they basically have said, "Oh, it's been settled. We don't want to talk about it," and then they move away. However, there are a number of lawsuits and actions being filed in international bodies that will help to force the issue. And so the United States will eventually have to pay attention to it. Unfortunately for the United States, by the time they do pay attention to it, they will already have lost quite a bit of the leverage that they may have had with international community, because the international community is looking at it and saying, this is an unjust, an unjust situation for Hawaiians, and we want to see justice done. The longer the United States delays talking about it, the worse it looks for the United States.
So the dialogue has to come first, the discussion, the decision by the United States.
Not necessarily, but let's assume
yes,
that
it
that's
would be
one
the
way.
perfect world,
Yeah,
right, to have
right.
discussion. And essentially the next step is the United States stepping aside.
The discussion occurred 121 years ago, or 120 years ago in a month. And that was the discussion between Liliuokalani and Cleveland, in which Cleveland admitted the United States had violated international law and violated the sovereignty of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and committed to return the Hawaiian Kingdom back to the sovereign as well as to the people of Hawaii. So that was what is loosely called the Liliuokalani-Cleveland Agreement. So that discussion was already made. The United States already said it is our duty to return the Hawaiian Kingdom, only they never did so.
And Cleveland left, and then history has revealed itself.
Right. But the discussion already occurred, and the legal point established that the United States has no business here.
Okay, even though that discussion did occur, do the people currently in the United States, power and authority, acknowledge that the discussion was had, that there was?
No.
Okay, so it's almost like starting over again.
Not necessarily, though,
Because of the lawsuits.
And because of the lawsuits plus that discussion, because they can't ignore it. They can't, and that's why they're avoiding coming into any discussions, because when those questions are raised, they will not be able to answer it. We had an opportunity in Geneva a few years ago. The United States was giving what is called the Universal Periodic Review about the United States' role or the United States practices in human rights. And so in a side event of that, the United States had their panel there of State Department people, and it was open to questions from the floor. And one of our people, it was Poka Lainui, asked them a question straight out. What procedures were used to make Hawaii a state of the United States? And the United States just bailed on the question. I mean, they refused to answer it. They changed the subject. They went. What they said was, "Oh, that's already been settled politically, and let's move on."
I would think
this also happened when the Russians asked them that same question a couple of years earlier.
I would think it is from their perspective, they wouldn't even know what to do.
Yes.
Who do they even start to talk to about stepping aside? Because there's so many complications. But say that did happen in our lifetime, the kingdom becomes restored, and then there are procedures for people to determine whether they are a citizen of the kingdom or a citizen of the kingdom. That would be the only choice, right?
Right. Like I said, there's been precedents. There's 147 other countries that were formed under all kinds of different circumstances, but they went through the procedure of how do we take back control of our destiny and of our decision making. And there were some that were bloody wars and things like that, but in many cases there were actually reasonable and time given a transitional period where the most recent one is Iraq. Now, that's a big mess, but the steps were actually followed where the United States invaded, displaced Saddam Hussein, and then helped to build a new Iraqi government. And basically, the United States never imposed U.S. laws in Iraq. It always maintained Iraqi sovereignty. But they built a new government, they had elections and all that, and they built a constitutional government. And that is the responsibility of whoever is occupying the country.
It will take a lot of citizen leadership
Yes.
and participation,
Correct.
even to get to the point of compelling the United States to continue the discussion.
Right.
You've been doing this for many years.
But that's why we need the time. The transition time is when you build that leadership.
Can you talk a little bit
yes.
more about what's
Okay.
happening now as we wrap up our program?
Right, and what's happening now is that many people are beginning to realize that we do have to build our country. So people are envisioning where is our country going? What would our country be like under our control, under the control of the Hawaiians, who have this wonderful spirit of aloha? Would we be any different from those that are controlling our country now?
Are these public forums or dialogues or quiet
these
circles?
These are conversations going on within the different sovereignty groups and amongst us, as well as some of it is being published. But what we're just kind of at what Poka Lainui calls the dreaming stage. What would it be like if we were in charge of our own future? How would we manage things? And and it's really quite a beautiful time.
And I'm really pleased to hear that. You're a very kind man, and you've been doing this work for decades.
Yeah.
You still have a positive spirit. You're working with many different people. And I guess in closing, what I want to ask you is, This is your life work. And as you continue and working also
Well,
with,
actually, my life work is music.
yeah, that's true. It's all incorporated.
This is what I'm doing now.
Yes, and you work with young people. What closing thought might you give to if someone's listening to this program and they think that, you know, this has some merit and they want to be part of a transition that's really going to enable the kingdom to return? What might you say to them?
I would say that it's not going to be a bad experience, because if you think of yourselves, most people who've decided to live here have fallen in love with Hawaii, not just because of the place, but because of the people and the values that we hold here, and the inclusiveness that we have in Hawaii, and the way we treat one another. And so if you can extrapolate that to a country that's run by people like us, you know, what kind of a country will that be? You know, it's going to be one that's very different from the country that exists or the state that exists now.
And internationally recognized with a viable passport so that they can come and go as they want.
Yes. Yeah, and actually enjoy all of the other benefits of being an independent nation, like not having to clear everything through Washington or depend on Washington to ship us our food, or, you know, that kind of thing. We can make treaties and we can do exchange and trade with the countries around us in the Pacific. We can enter into a partnership with the other Pacific islands who are waiting for us. I mean, actually begging us to come back and be a part of this new era, the Pacific era that they're participating in.
That will probably be the content of our next conversation when we're able to do that, because we import 90% of everything we use easily.
Yes.
And we are dependent on the United States for a number of different components of our life. So if you see us in the international arena, it could be very exciting.
Yes. And the Hawaiians, of course, were very industrious people. When Captain Cook came here, he was so surprised as to the industry and how little actual time it took, because the Hawaiians had it so well organized and working with nature and all that. So if we return to that kind of a mentality, how do we take care of ourselves and prosper that way? I believe that we'll succeed very well in, one, getting us off the dependency of the United States, and then also opening up our options to world trade rather than just with the United States.
You really present a global perspective. And when we talk about global learning for our young people, it's very reassuring to hear from you and your organization that perspective that we have a place in the world.
Yes.
And also that we will be inclusive.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank
it was
you so
very
much
enlightening, and we'll talk soon again.
Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you. I'm Lila Berg, host of this program. You've been listening to Sovereignty Conversations, Models of Sovereignty from our thought leaders, and today's guest was Leon Siu. Thank you very much. Join us again. Aloha.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, kupa ama hope o kaina, ki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, pala pala anu me ka paka.